One of my greatest joys as a literary scholar and educator is not just reading new books, but actually revisiting, rereading old favorites, or sometimes books that I didn't actually like. There's one book that really impacted me as a teenager, a book that it's kind of cliche, but made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. And that was The Stranger by Albert Camus. L'étranger in the original French. For our UK friends, it's The Outsider. The Stranger is a very special book to me. Like I said, I read it in high school English class, ironically, because it actually is the book that inspired me to learn French. Because of this book, I wanted to read everything by Albert Camus, and I decided to do it in the original. So since then, I learned French. Même aujourd'hui, je parle français. But the books I'm going to show you today are all in English. There's first of all The Stranger, like I said, The Outsider. This is probably his most famous work. It's not his best work, it is his most famous work. It's about Meursault, who, for whatever reason, one day kills a man in cold blood. That's sort of the midpoint of the story. It's not a spoiler, though, because it is about him grappling with a world that has decided he's guilty, even though he is guilty for the wrong reasons. And I think it's just a fascinating look into how we decide other people do and do not belong to our in groups, what they get punished for, and who gets to dispense that punishment, and how rebellion against this pronouncement by other people sometimes is our only tool to come out victorious. The Plague became pretty popular a couple years ago. You can probably guess why, but it is weird to see how history doesn't repeat itself, but kind of goes in circles, right? In layers, we can kind of see a lot of the same behaviors in people who just don't want to see reality for what it is. This one's a lot of fun, very scary to read in lockdown now that we're a couple of years past. I'd still recommend it. There's The Rebel. I think people like to say that he being Albert Camus was an existentialist. He hated being called an existentialist. He didn't prescribe to that so much as to absurdism, the idea that the world, there is just no place really for us humans, for the kinds of questions we're asking. We ask questions about eternity and infinity and purpose and meaning, and the universe just isn't equipped to answer those questions. And so man asking, and I say man because he says man asking the universe about what his purpose is, and the universe having no response in return, that gap is the absurd. And The Rebel is one of his attempts to describe how one might live in that kind of universe. There's also the nonfiction attempt to do so, The Myth of Sisyphus. This is, again, it's not an extraordinary work of philosophy, but I quite like it. He takes up the question of suicide and he asks, if life has no meaning, well, why shouldn't we? And he treats it as a serious question, and I don't see why one shouldn't. I don't know that I agree with all of his conclusions, but it's really wonderful to see his mind at work and to kind of grapple with these arguments the way he would like to grapple with them. And now, knowing what we know today, that seems silly. Then there is The Fall, La Chute, and this actually is now my favorite book by Camus. He spent a lot of his time before his early unfortunate death thinking about what it's like to live a meaningful life in a world devoid of meaning, how we can make our own meaning in that emptiness between the desire to have a purpose and the purposelessness of existence. How do we navigate that? And The Fall is my personal favorite negotiation with that question. Yeah, teenage me was really, really struck by Albert Camus, and I'm really thankful. Even if today I don't have the same feelings about his work that I did at the time, I still think about it often. I read The Stranger once a year, every year, and I read it in French, which I learned thanks to Albert Camus.